Hello again, everyone. Edwin Lerner back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about transit Mercury making a square, opposition, or inconjunct aspect to one's natal north node. Now, when we're talking about transits that involve Mercury, they can be about communication, assimilating information, mobility, siblings, analysis. Now, when transit Mercury is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal north node, well, this may manifest in communications, assimilating information, mobility, siblings, cousins, neighbors, some things you might be trying to analyze. It may conflict with your future, your destiny, your mission. It could be that siblings or cousins or neighbors or people you knew that were prominent in your early education. They could have been, classmates in school. They might be asking you, to do things, and maybe their interests are having to take precedence over what you're trying to do as far as your future goes. Um, if it's in, transit Mercury is in Taurus, it could be, very persistent. One, siblings, cousins, or neighbors, and ones that are very stubborn about getting their own way, or they can be Taurus, Sun, Moon, Ascendant people, or ones that embody those characteristics. Now, these transits of Mercury, they don't last very long. They last for days, but they're not. They last a little bit longer than the transits of the Moon. The transits of the Moon last approximately 10 hours. On average, transits of Mercury can have some significance, but again, you don't have them for a very prolonged or protracted period. But anyway, now, the thing about this is, too, it might also be where it could be where your communications may be conflicting with you, with you trying to develop the positive attributes of your placements. It could be that people you see, your day-to-day communications, maybe they're pestering you and calling you persistently. Or again, it could be going back to siblings, cousins, or neighbors might be providing some kind of distraction. It might be, from you trying to develop, the good qualities of the placement. Now, another thing is too, the North Node in astrology can be about issues one may have to address and confront. And there might be maybe there's some, negative issues, really. Maybe some news you receive is not necessarily good. And it may be something, that may have to be addressed at this time. Or maybe the news might be delayed in terms of those issues, because maybe the message, it takes longer to be received than usual. It can also be, the North Node is what we're aspiring to be. So it can be a situation with these transits that there may be issues like with local transportation that you have to take care of. It could be some issue with a car. It may be, again, going back to siblings, cousins, or neighbors, people prominent in your early education. It could be people that you know well during your short journeys. Maybe conflicting with this, or it could simply be where you're having a hard time articulating what you're aspiring to be. If this is the North Node is an Aquarius as an example, it could be you may be aspiring to be somebody that's very selfless and unobtrusive people. It could be somebody that just wants to do things for the collective good of others, be more inconspicuous. Remember, if you have the North Node and natal North Node in Aquarius in your natal chart, your natal South Node is in Leo, so you're trying to get away from the more, I guess you could say, I don't want to say arrogant, but the more flamboyant or attention-seeking energy, standing out. Whereas the North Node in Aquarius is more about blending in more with others and doing things collectively. Doing things for the greater good of a group and a team. So anyway, but it may be something where it might be hard for you to try to, either understand this or communicate. So it might be, maybe there's difficulty in understanding how you're going to be developing that energy at this time, because Mercury is about comprehension and understanding. Now, another thing too is that the North Node in astrology is connected with what we're moving toward, what we're directed toward at this time, learning to be. And maybe it's harder to learn this at this time more so than usual. It may be, a situation where, you may be trying to, as far as Mercury's about, processing and assimilating information. And maybe there's some difficulty in you trying to, process that information, right, in terms of what you really want to be and what you're actually going toward at this time. There might be maybe there's some errands you have to do with local transportation. Again, going back to siblings, cousins, or neighbors, may be conflicting with this at this time. And the thing is, now the North Node in astrology is also connected with what we're going to emphasize or accentuate more in the second half of your life. If you're already in, this phase of your life, say if you're like 35 or older, you may already be accentuating this energy. Now, if you're in that stage before that, you may be still learning more to develop those attributes at this time. It doesn't mean you can't use them at an earlier point of time before the second half of life, but they generally are going to be more emphasized at that time. And there's probably, if you have this transit, and it's before like age 35, you may already be having no difficulty, maybe really in as far as the development of those North Node traits. But if this is after, you may have already had established some of those attributes anyway, but there still may have, there might still be some difficulty in understanding, what that energy is going to be for. Maybe to some, that could be, how this may manifest and pan out. But anyway, another thing too is, another way this transit may manifest, it could be siblings, cousins, neighbors, may conflict with what you're, directed toward at this time. Say if your natal North Node is in Taurus, as an example, in the fourth house, it could be trying to attain some kind of peace, stability, and tranquility, which is Taurus, in your home life at this time. And say if you have the natal North Node in Taurus in your eighth house, it could simply be maybe trying to be very stable and unflappable in crisis situations, and having certain loyalty and being very steadfast in a shared resources situation. But another thing too is that another way this transit may be expressed, it could be that local transportation issues may make it difficult, to maybe it's difficult to confront or address certain things. It might say if the North Node, for example, is in Libra in your 11th house in your natal chart, maybe it has to do with reconciliation, with a friend or an acquaintance. It might be also that news received may adversely affect your future at this time. Say if the North Node in your chart, a natal chart, is in Pisces in the fifth house, as an example. That could be doing things maybe with fantasy games, or fantasy game production, or perhaps simulated sports matchups, hypothetical matchups, like when you go on the whatifsports.com and you could play like simulated sports matchups from teams from the past going against each other. Of course, that would be impossible in reality. And also too, maybe your vehicle is having trouble moving forward, but I'm being flippant with that one. But also too, there may be more difficulty in articulating what you want, what you're learning to be, what you're aspiring to be. And I would say, especially if this is taking place before that second half of life, because there may be some difficulty anyway in understanding that mission, your future purpose, what you're directed toward. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. Anyway, now, let's say, for example, if you have, the North Node, in Virgo in your 11th house in your natal chart, it could be very, doing something with very analytical astrology as an example. So, anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Leonard saying stay well.